Hi, welcome to the Bass Monk channel. Today we have an epic interview with New York area drummer James Benard as he shares his 50 years of drum wisdom. I've listed the topics and times below in case you want to skip ahead. We end the interview with James giving us a personal tour of his cymbal collection. I hope you enjoy what you see here, and if you do, please like and subscribe below as there is more to come. Welcome to Bass Monk. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to an old friend of mine, a premier famous drummer in the New York area, James Benard. And we're gonna, we could talk about so much, but I think we talked about, we're gonna zero in on cymbals.
Yeah.
Because as a bass player, I have just discovered how deep a subject it is. And we're gonna explore, but first let's talk to James about who he is. Who is this guy here, man? And give us a little history of when you started playing, how long you're playing, stuff like that.
Well, I started playing when I was about 12 years old, which was about 50 years ago. And I was at a summer camp, and they had a marching band. I would borrow one of the snare drummer's drumsticks and play on the tent floor, and I wasn't in the band, and he would just lend them to me, and I got to know the tattoos, I got to know the little rhythms of the snare drum of the marching band. And it just turned out that halfway through that summer season he got sick and had to go home, and I was drafted and shanghaied into playing in the marching band, which I actually loved. And so I was in the marching band, and that's what started me off playing. But I gravitated to drums. I don't know why, exactly. But I did like drumsticks and drums. And, for a year or two, I just played, I played on different people's drum kits, little kids around the neighborhood. And I'm looking at your table here, and the reason why my dad got me my first drum set was that I would play my sticks on the kitchen side of the kitchen table, and I started making dents. I dented it all up. And so to stop me from killing the furniture in the whole house, he bought me a drum set for my birthday, and the rest is history. It was a Ludwig kit. It was a Ludwig
that's what
white,
was happening back then.
Yep, it was a white pearl Ludwig kit from a kid right around the block. Who was selling it, and but actually it's funny, talk about cymbals. Before I got my drum kit, I guess I was about 13 years old, maybe I was 14 already. A friend of mine and yours, a guy named Nick, who used to play the drums, he knew I was playing and I didn't have anything to play. My buddies picked up a bass and a guitar, we'd play in the basement. And he gave me two crummy old little cymbals, like hi-hat cymbals. And I made this really crazy, I put them on a board with some pieces of molding, and I whittled it down like an angle. And I put the two, and I just banged those sticks, with my sticks, I would bang the cymbals. And we'd play our Black Sabbath tunes and our Cream tunes in Carl's basement, or Andy's basement, or my basement. And I just bash those cymbals. So I actually started out on cymbals alone. And we just went nuts with those things until I got my drum kit.
And then you went to Miami University.
Yes, fast forward to University of Miami.
That's post Pat Metheny and Jocko?
Yes, but 1977. So they were not around there right then, but they had basically just been there a year or two before. Will Lee, the Dixie Dregs, a bunch of people, were there. So there was still the atmosphere of them. They'd come in too to do performances down in Coconut Grove or around the Miami area. I saw Jocko play at the Travelers Lounge, I think it was. It was in the airport. There was a benefit for a Cuban percussionist who was a burn victim and had to raise money. And Jocko did his Star Spangled Banner with the Echo, the MXR Echo thing. He did this whole thing. Yeah, he did this whole thing.
So you live out in the Hamptons, the famous Hamptons, and you're basically first call. If somebody big comes in and is going to play at the Talk House, they'll call you. And I remember my first impression with you was when you said, "Yeah, I'm playing with Tiny Tim."
Tiny Tim. Oh my gosh.
And so I was like, yeah, James's first call. Tiny Tim is playing at the Talk House, and James is on drums.
That's right.
So I had a question about Tiny Tim.
Tiny.
He was married to Twiggy. Was it arranged or true love?
I don't know. It could have just been a television romance.
Oh, okay. I thought you might have some insight into that.
No, Miss Vicky actually was his wife and who took care of him. He died that same year after I played, so I got to play with him just at the end, of his
I didn't know that.
life.
Wow.
And I, tiptoe through the tulips, right? And so he was a goofy character, but he was an encyclopedia of Americana music. He knew a million songs from like the turn of the century, and he played on his little ukulele, and he knew the words and he knew the history.
Wow.
He was like a historian. He was unbelievable. My respect grew from that gig. I had no idea. Right. I just thought he wasn't just a clown. He was really like a historian.
Yeah, most people you take for granted. If you're in a position, you've earned it in various sort of ways. The public's perception of you is very minimal. Mm. But in order to get anywhere in life, you've paid your dues. You just show up. Right, so that's a good case and study right there.
Yeah, right.
Right. The questioning was like, how do you establish yourself in a region? So there's so many musicians out there. Do you have any advice for anyone that would stake their claim somewhere and not have big dreams of being famous, but let's just say, what's being realistic these days?
I would say it's just being there. You have to, almost like raising a child. I mean, you could, the main thing is just showing up. Show up to your jam nights and make yourself known. Don't think that you're gonna, rewrite the book on, taking over an area and, because a lot of times that'll backfire on you because there's a little network going on. There's, people are set in their ways. I'm notoriously mellow about, I'm not very pushy. I'm not really very aggressive. So on the merits of your playing, if you can just have a little patience, you will get known and called for gigs if you just bide your time, because things happen with people. I mean, it's a dysfunctional world. People get sick, people have fights, bands break up.
Right.
If you're on time and you're a trustworthy person, that's almost more important than being a good musician. Because I've got many gigs just because I showed up on time or before time. Being a drummer, you usually have to show up earlier to set up the equipment and not just be there 5 minutes before, and then you really make a band late because you're still setting up your drums. So, I think being a nice person does count for something. Other people might not think that, but I think that it's good to be, civil and nice to people instead of, being a diva or something.
What about diving a little deeper, being a loud drummer or a soft drummer, a drummer that plays with dynamics? that reputation can stick with you, right? Like guitar players and things. Oh, they play too loud. I think sometimes that is a perception, especially if you have to play small clubs, restaurants, you're not on a big stage somewhere. I think that counts for a lot.
Yes, dynamics. That's why the University of Miami, we used to have these small group rehearsals in these little teeny practice rooms that were like just enough for a piano player with a piano, and they'd stick a 4-piece band in, and the graduate assistant would come in, and kind of be the teacher of that band. So he's the 5th person, and we'd be, the drum set, we'd be up and squeezing into each other, and he would go, "Play it softer, no, softer," and they would just be like, they would be Nazis with the dynamics, and that really taught me to play soft. And if you can, my thing is if you're going to be in a small venue, play so soft that they beg you to play louder. And if you can do that, then you're good. A lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people, it hurts their ego to play soft. They have their sound. It's like if they have to play in a place where people are right on top of them, it's their problem, and it just doesn't work that way. I mean,
any other tips like brushes, thinner sticks, any ways to mute the drums, or?
Oh yeah, there's so many, little brushes. Brush technique is great, and now that there's more resources for blast stick type sticks.
Oh, right.
It's not.
Yeah,
they're great because you can actually roll with these sticks and get definition instead of it being so mushy you can't hear it. There's all kinds of variations in the plastic hardness of these plastic rods and all kinds of different ways. Brushes is just a whole art in itself. I mean, brushes are beautiful.
And they sound
brushes.
beautiful too.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah.
Like Philly Joe Jones. I mean, all these brush guys. And you can just do so much with brushes. And a brush with a stick. I mean, percussion is everything, so.
Right.
Anything you can think up, I know guys that play with like chopsticks, they're just like these little and they'll play and sound great with it. It's no one way of doing things. And you can play very softly with regular size sticks also. That's a whole other thing. You could have a regular size stick, 5A, 5B, let's say, if anybody knows what that is, and you have to be able to play soft with it. And there's an art to doing that too. Yeah, and it's great because, you got to change the way you play. You won't be able to do things that you can do loud when you could just let it go and let your hands fall. You have to pull back.
What about muscle memory? I remember seeing an interview with Pat Metheny with Sanchez, and Pat asked him to play quieter, and he said energy dropped. But Pat said, "No, I still want you to play intense, but I want you quieter." And he said his muscle memory wasn't used to that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So he had to train himself for his muscles to know how to be intense, because people think intensity might mean loudness or some sort of energy. But Pat, with his advanced compositions and soundscape sense, this is what he was asking him, and he said he had to figure this out.
Yeah.
Now he's the number 1 drummer in the world, right? Antonio Sanchez.
Oh, he's great.
He owns the world, right?
Yeah. Wasn't he the drummer in that Birdman movie?
Yes. So.
That was amazing. Yeah. The muscle memory, it actually takes some warming up to do. Sometimes you can't just do it right off the bat, you have to kind of take a minute to dial that back, and then to get that intensity going with the smaller movements, and it's a whole different embouchure.
I've seen you do it, man.
It's like an embouchure, a trumpet
good point.
player. It's like if you have a wide one or whatever. It's you all of a sudden you got to dial it back, and it takes a little, and then because if you relax, you might be a little too loud. So if there's a tension, then all of a sudden you're not fighting it so much anymore. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire stuff here.
Fire
Okay.
away.
All right, so tuning drums, major thirds or minor thirds?
I suppose a minor third between the bottom head and the top head is good. What I try to do is I just tighten the two heads up so they are resonant, and then you try to, what happens is you will find a note, and then what happens is that usually the bottom head is the head that tunes the note of the drum, like, the pitch of the drum. The bottom head actually is more than the top to me, and you'll find that it will have a tone. The drum will resonate. If you find that resonating frequency, it's like the note of the shell of the drum. And then if you keep that, you can then tighten the top head to get your feel, and it will change the pitch somewhat, but then you compensate by doing it so major third minor.
Good.
I don't really know if that does that with every drum, but that's interesting.
Next question, snares, Black Beauty or anything else?
Oh my gosh. I mean, a Black Beauty is a kind of desert island snare drum where that you want to keep that, do your Black Beauty. It's an all-purpose, all-around drum. It can be mellow. It cuts. Nowadays, there's so many different boutique-style drums. There's production drums that are great in their own right. I fell in love with a DW Edge snare recently. I got it used. It's a hybrid snare, so they're making these hybrid drums, metal and wood together, or different metals like stacked up on top of each other. They're making reverse edges where there's a brass inside and wood hoops, wood rims. I like my brass rim with maple inside right now. That's my go-to snare. But I have a Ludwig Supraphonic. I have a couple of them that just, you can't go wrong with them. That's just good old Ludwig Supra.
All right, back to cymbals. Turkey versus Wuchang.
I don't think, there's no contest. Turkey.
Just thought it was a shocking question.
China has been making cymbals and gongs probably before anyone, thousands of years. Something about Turkey, you got that bell brass, that brass, they just, there's these guys in these little rooms hammering away on their ingots, and they have like what do you call it? What's that? Anvil, and they're just ding, 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 ding. They're all day long. They're hammering away.
Why do producers hate drummers? Drum machines, samples,
because we're
loops.
a pain in the ass.
What?
Drums are a pain. Drums have to come early and do a sound check for an hour.
Tech.
Right, you have to hit the tom-tom, boom, 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 boom. Snare drum, please, boom, boom, boom. Bass drum, boom, boom, boom. Back to the floor tom, boom, boom, boom. Now play it all around the kit. And there's how many microphones? Maybe there could be 8 mics, there could be 12 mics on the kit. And there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong, and you have to EQ it. A bass player comes, he just plugs directly into the mixing board.
That's right, that's what I do.
That's it. Put a plug in on it, it's all good. Guitar player maybe mic his amp a little bit. There's 50 million guitar plugins now. So drums are labor intensive, and so that's why when the drum machines came around, the Linn drum came. It was
I had one.
In the 70s, early mid 70s. I used to go to the music store in the morning and just play their Linn drum for hours. I would figure out how to do it, do a drum beat with my hands. But when you can have a perfect drum machine, and as they got more sophisticated, sounding just like a drum set with playing samples, why hire a drummer? Why? there's a guy that has perfect sound. Just plug it in.
Yeah.
You don't have to mic it up. You don't have to do sound check. You don't have to rent a drum set or whatever. You don't have to deal with a drunken drummer or whatever.
I had one of the first Linn drums, and that's how I broke into the studio scene. That people say, how can you break in to an existing field? Mine was, I had one of the first ones. I lucked out, and studios couldn't get them, so they hired me, and then they found out I was a bass player, and I developed a relationship. But one of the funny stories about the Linn drum was, me and my brother played a gig, and we said, we'll just bring the drum machine because it's cool. And they weren't known then. And we went to a restaurant, and we played the drums, but guess what happened? We never played in perfect time. We weren't used to it. And we found out how sloppy our sense of time was and everything, because this thing would just leave you behind. And we're playing these tunes that we're not so familiar with, and we're like, oh my God, it's like we really have to pay attention. Yeah. That was the beginning of my awareness of playing in time.
Yeah, and so you were the guy that I didn't have those gigs. See, they stealing gigs from me already.
That's right.
Also, and now getting into our more modern times, is the looper technology. Yeah. I mean, there's loopers everywhere now. These true guitar players play a loop. You step on the pedal, you do your pattern, it plays it, and then you can. And that actually has helped so many what's the word? Time problems musicians to get better time, because it becomes a metronome, and you're actually playing it, so you don't have anybody to blame but yourself. And it has so many. And in fact, I play with many guitar bands where I have to play to their loop that they make right in real time.
Yeah, I was wondering how you have to get a special mix, because you really have to pay attention.
Yeah, you got to hear it. So that means that you can't be too loud. So you have to really be listening, and it's an art. And it took me a while. It's like playing to a click track live. You're playing to, and then what happens is, if the loop is like weird, or they puts a little weird thing, then it skips, or it sounds like it. You have to, and it keeps going. You have to actually compensate. So you have to listen that much harder.
Cut it off at the right moment.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, I before we go down to hear the cymbals and talk about them, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about your time with Tony Williams, that you took a few lessons, and what that experience was like.
Well, yeah. Tony Williams, the famous Anthony Williams. Tony Williams, jazz drummer, famous, played with Miles Davis, had the Tony Williams lifetime.
Who doesn't know Tony Williams? Right?
Well, yeah, there are people, because he crossed over. He was an early jazz fusion rock pioneer. He played with Jack Bruce. I mean, Jack Bruce was in his band. Yeah. He didn't get into the rock thing, Ginger Baker and Keith Moon and John Bonham, but he was just a force of nature. He had his creds playing with Miles Davis
at 17.
Yeah, 17 years old, doing
Herbie Hancock,
these classic albums with Herbie, and I, when I was 19 years old, he put an ad in the Village Voice newspaper, which was a New York City, paper.
Icon paper.
Yeah, and they had a classified section. It was drum lessons with Tony Williams. And one of my friends, it might have been you, who said, James, you have to do this. Tony Williams is giving drum lessons. You don't get this every day. So I answered the ad, and I went up to Harlem. I took the out from the island. I took that subway up to work. Walked up there, and banged on his door for about 20 minutes before he opened the door. That was like almost a rite of passage or something. And there I'm looking into kind of a brownstone apartment, if I remember, wood floors, the New York City. And in the back in the corner is the yellow Tony Williams drum kit. It's there, man.
Nice.
And the first thing I want to do is jump on that kit. And he goes,
Rich.
"No, you are not playing drums right now." He brings a practice pad out in front of him. He goes, "Just start playing something." He's kind of like Tony. He's just sitting there, watching me, kind of not talking, a little intimidating in a way. Nice guy, but. And so I start playing, I got my Buddy Rich technique, my Buddy Rich book, which is awesome. And he goes, "Stop. You got to stop. You got to hold your sticks a different way."
I remember that.
He goes, "It's about hands."
Were you doing traditional back then? Or match?
I think I was matched.
Yeah.
I think I was matched. It might have been both because I kind of hybrid, but it was matched. And the fulcrum grip. So what do you mean fulcrum grip? I mean, the bounce, the fulcrum. He goes, and he said, "That's stupid." He said, "If you want to play 12 hours a day, your little fingers are not strong enough." And that was his thing about it. I mean, you see guys that do it, whatever. But what his point was, he got me holding the sticks with my back two fingers in matched grip. And he said, it's about hands. It's not about like little fingers. It's about hands and about the arms. And
bounce?
Yeah, but, it's about using your body to, instead of like...
Because he was strong.
Economy of movement, like... What kind of rhythm? If you're just sitting there, you're like, it's like a dance, and I think that's where I got him coming from. So that first, I didn't take very many lessons with him, and it was mainly on the practice pad. And so do that for 15 minutes, and he went away. I just did double stroke rolls, trying to get this hand together, and I still play that way today, kind of a hybrid way of doing it, but it's almost like you're a playing, conga player, playing with your hands, instead of just this little bouncy thing where you're like, you're using your arms, you're using your hands, you're using your body, and then he got me into the same way. Then I finally got to sit on the yellow kit, and I was like, "Okay, teach you something cool." It's like, no, just ghost your bass drum pedal on 1, 2, 3, 4, but don't hit it, and pick your hi-hat on 2 and 4 with your foot, but rock your foot, heel up, and just bounce it and pick it up on 2 and 4. So I'm picking up my things.
Oh, man.
I'm playing with like this. It's like, oh my gosh, my body's like into it. I'm not used to this, And so that was really the main thing. He was giving me exercises like going around the toms, like kind of melodic tom-tom exercises, which he is known for.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, he's a melodic player that uses his tom-toms melodically. I mean, everything he does is great. And so he just really started me on basics. He wouldn't really, and I didn't get a chance to take enough lessons to get really too much farther than the basics, but
that's what you need.
I incorporated that in, and and then he shortly after that, I think he moved to LA. He went away, out. Yeah. So,
great story.
And I went down to Miami. So
yeah. All right. So
yeah, Tony,
we're going to conclude, but we're going to move into the cymbal thing. So we're going to go downstairs. James brought a lot of cymbals over, and I actually have a cymbal on order. It might show up, and we might have an unboxing. We'll see.
That would be cool.
But I guess a leading question is, why don't musicians that aren't drummers know anything about cymbals? Now, I have a rehearsal studio downstairs, and so I have a drum kit, and I'm also an engineer, so I'm into miking it. So I have a slight interest in drums. But still, until I bought my first cymbal, I really didn't know anything about them. I would just see a drummer show up. Oh, he has one cymbal. I play with a drummer who has one cymbal. I don't even think about it. Maybe the question should be, why should other musicians think about or know about cymbals? What's the value in other musicians other than drummers knowing about it?
Cymbals to me are the ambience of the music. It's the wash. It's the air that the music is floating on. There's rhythm happening, but there's also this ambience in the air. You hit a cymbal, it takes a little while for it to die out. And there's a music to that, and there's a tone. Cymbals have a tone, so you're hitting the cymbal. It might sound, the initial attack might sound good, but it might start going like,
like a weird overtone?
Yeah, weird overtones, like a note.
Yes.
That you might not notice, and it might not even come out in recordings a lot of times because you have gates and you have things. But I really got pretty finicky over the years on cymbals, especially kind of recently, maybe in the last 15 or so years. Like a lot of companies, Turkish companies, have been popping up that are making affordable cymbals, because you would think of Zildjian Turkish cymbals, these incredibly expensive vintage cymbals, and that rival anything. They're handmade, they're hand hammered, they have their secret recipe of bronze and brass and silver and what they make the cymbals out of.
Yeah.
And incredibly musical, some of the bells and like lathing and, or not lathing, these raw cymbals, these trashy cymbals, incredibly musical cymbals. And so if it's, a cheap cymbal bothers me. A hi-hat that's like a stamped, and I got to say though, there's cheap cymbals that aren't too bad for a beginner line. You can get a pretty decent cymbal.
The packages they sell.
You can get these packages. You can get these things that are just cast cymbals. But you can find cymbals, I look for used cymbals, and I have a price range, and I start collecting these cymbals, and they're just beautiful. They just have this air, this ambience that once you have it, it's hard to go back to a cheesy sounding cymbal that's just like a piece of metal, that doesn't have any musical value.
I want to check the thing here.
Yeah.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so why, let's dig a little deeper. Why should a band leader, let's say, care? Have you ever been told, don't bring cymbals, bring cymbals? Has anyone ever even, you've been playing drums for 50 years, has anyone ever commented on your cymbals?
Yes, no, not very many, really. Really, mostly not. You're right. I mean, cymbals are overlooked. Cymbals are a thing that people don't think about too much, unless you're really a drummer or somebody, a deeper thinking person that thinks about that kind of stuff. Cymbals are just, they kind of are,
They're just drummers' domain only.
Yeah, that's, you're pretty much right about that. Of course, whether to say that I might get a gig over somebody else because of my cymbals, it's a psychological thing that's more in the subconscious of the way it makes a band sound in a room. I think there is something, they might not know what it is, that's why one drummer sound is better than another. And it could be because that cymbal, wow, it's just, so cool and hip. They might think it's because the drummer's playing a certain way, when it's just that cool sounding cymbal is making it so good instead of this ding, 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 thing that's...
Right. Maybe some of the bias, if I think about it, as a bass player, my bias is, drummers tend to play loud. Will he play loud? Or will he play soft? This is a big fear when anyone plays out. Will the guitar, who's going to play loud? Because, okay, that's a normal way of thinking. But I guess one of my biases when I think about it would be, oh, that drummer has a lot of cymbals. He's going to be loud. He'll be bashing all those cymbals. But that's not true. He's using them for color. He's using them for notes, because if he has a lot of cymbals, obviously his taste, like in expensive wine, he knows that the overtone series of those cymbals won't clash, and and he's using them musically. They're colors.
Yes, yeah, they are colors, and I love to just do cymbals. You can play a samba on a cymbals, just on the bells, and when the hi-hat going, and I just love coloration. Cymbal colors. On my chart, like a lot of intros. Cymbal colors, no time yet, and that's when I can hit the bells and do all kinds of little rolls on the cymbals, little swells, and there's so much you can choke the cymbal and do these bass effects. There's so much you can do.
Right. In fact, when we play together, we play in a trio with my brother, Beatle Jazz. That's when I'm like, as a bass player, I say, oh, I'm in a trio situation. It's going to sound a little thin. There's no keys. No guitars. And then now I say, oh, glad he bought cymbals, because those are going to add all the different, it's like having a percussionist. Now they're like having extra notes in the band, especially when there's only 3 people playing.
Yes.
Then that's, I think, when I became aware of it. It's like, hey, there's only 3 of us. Look at all those cymbals, and these are choice cymbals. And I'm like enjoying the sound of them. And
the emotions, you're giving the emotions, and you can be on top of the beat, and get things a little excited. Hopefully you're going to rush too much unless you really want to. Be in control. You can lay it back and be fat. Lay back that backbeat snare or whatever you want to do. There's so much you can do. You can tighten it up so there's no space and it's just, or you can open it up so everything's washing and the hi-hats are growling, or anything in between. At any given time, in a milliseconds notice from one thing to another, it is just something I love. I love it. As a musician, usually, especially a drummer, when you're on top of a drum set, it's not the way the drums sound out into the audience. It's usually worse. You're not hearing your bass drum. Of course, with monitoring, you could have in-ear monitors, and that really helps. That's really nice. But 20 feet out is where the sound is, where it starts sounding good, because it's all blending. Your hi-hat really isn't as loud as you think it is, and stuff like that. So to be outside of yourself is one of the hardest things to do. Because, just to try to get the beat right and to be good enough to play, is hard enough. Then you have to be able to put that almost on automatic and get outside of yourself and outside of your own ego to be like a spectator. Is an ultimate goal. A lot of times what helps me out is I record a lot. I record my gigs constantly.
He records every gig. I've never been at a gig where you have special places where you put the...
Yeah, I got my little digital
very
recorder.
Serious. Early on.
I started out with the Super Scope, the cassette deck, and then it went to the Walkman, cassette Walkman thing with the stereo. They were pretty good. And then it went to then I got mini disc recorders, which I'm so glad I don't have to do anymore. And now the little digital recorders are amazing. Yeah. They're just forgiving. You can put them anywhere. They really get great sound. You can edit them but listening back to a recording, there'd be nights where I thought I was great, and you listen to it like, what was I thinking? Groove was off. I'm, overplaying. I'm bashing cymbals. And then some nights where I thought I was terrible, it was like, wow, this is so much. This is great. So, So
You're taking it in and you're making a loop. Your
Yes.
tone and everything, yeah. That's where you just become more organic about what's really in the now moment.
yeah, and over years of that recording and with studio experience too,
Yeah.
I get to where I know, what is sounding good and, outside of myself.
Yeah.
And that's such a good point, Edgar. Oh, I love you, man. It's
Love
just
you too,
like
man.
amazing.
Hey, let's go down and physically look at some of the cymbals James bought. We're going to continue, and I'm thanking James now for popping in. And
Thanks, Ed.
on
We got a lot of history. man.
Bass Monk,
Bass Monk, I like that.
we're trying out this channel. Hopefully, it's helping you guys out, and there'll be more to come. So let's check out your cymbals.
Okay, let's go. All right, let's talk about ride cymbals. We're talking about cymbals, right? So these are two Zildjian Constantinople K cymbals. They're both 22 inches, which is one of my favorite ride cymbal sounds. This was, they're very kind of jazzy sounding usually. Like this one, it has a lot of air. It might not cut through a loud rock band, but it's pretty musical. The bell. Can even crash it. So I really like the cymbal. It's nice. This is the same size, same make, Zildjian Constantinople crash, but it's a prototype. It's kind of a special order cymbal I got used. It has about 50 holes drilled in it. No, I'm not exaggerating. They're all over the place. I don't know why you could have rivets in them, but the thing is about 3 times thicker, so it sounds like this. Has a shimmering quality. Or this. So you have that. This more normal 22-inch K Zildjian Constantinople ride. I use it in many jazz gigs. I use it in Beatle jazz before I bought this one. Many times I'll use both these two because of the sound difference. But I use it in a small group setting, in small rooms, because it has that airy sound, but still with definition. This can cut more because it has more metal. It's thicker. And I can use this on a light rock gig even. It has a lot of character to it, Yeah, so that's about that. So these two cymbals are my rock cymbals because they cut and they're louder. The bells are bigger. They're pretty thick cymbals. They're both 22s. This is a little bit less than 22. This cymbal is made by an Italian company called UFIP, UFIP, and it is cast. It's made by pouring the molten metal into a spinning centrifuge mold, a cast that's spinning at a very high speed, and it spins out all the air bubbles out of the metal. They have killer bells. And then they hammer them. And this is a pasty cymbal. It's a dark, dry, heavy ride. And I love this cymbal. It has a lot of character. It can get loud, but it's still, I like the sound of it. So these are the two cymbals that I use more for my rock gigs. sweet cymbal. This one, on the other hand, sounds like this. Check that out, huh? So this one has a more metally, high-end sound, a little lower pitch. Maybe this one's lower. But they're just both incredible cymbals. You know, new, these cymbals cost about, $350, $400. Let me see what I got. I don't have any tape on this one. Did I put any tape on it? No tape on the back of this one either. UFIP. And this is my pasty. I really love this cymbal. I put it away in my basement for about 3 years, and then when I brought it back, I wondered why I put it away. The thing is great. It's just an all-around great cymbal. It's great for brushes too, because it's such a beast that the brushes will cut on the cymbal. Will really make a nice sound with brushes on this pasty cymbal. Alrighty, that's that for those two. Yeah. So now we have some American-made Zildjian cymbals. This is what they call an American K Zildjian. It's a 22-inch ride cymbal. This is an A Zildjian 24-inch ride. The thing's a monster. And I don't use this too much. I've used this a lot of times, and it's taking a nap for a couple of years.
Wait a second. Doesn't Captain America use this one?
Oh yeah, right. His shield, boy. You could put a pizza pie on that thing. But sweet. This one is has more of a gong-like quality because it will build up. This one gets lost in a band. I've tried to use it, but it gets a little bit lost. It might do with some couple of pieces of gaff tape underneath to stop it from washing so much. But it's a biggie. It's nice. Yeah. And those are the other. This is a kind of specialty cymbal. This is another, just another one. Yeah. So the 24. And the 22. This, American K's, you can, I buy a lot of cymbals used, so I don't know, I'm not really up on the list price, but these are, these go for maybe $350 to $350 around. This would probably, a 24-inch A Zildjian is probably about the same, maybe a little bit more. Really depending on where the sales are.
James, does it matter the age?
I think so. I think the molecules line up but it takes a bunch of years I think a cymbal has a kind of a break-in time. It's really subtle and it takes a long time, but I think older cymbals are better. I like older. I like used cymbals in good condition just because they kind of get mellowed out. Maybe a lot of times the grime and the dirt that gets in between the lathing, the grooves of the cymbal, that adds something. I hardly ever clean a cymbal. I like to have the dirt build up and the patina build up. And so, yeah, the older the cymbal, the better, I think. Older the better. Hopefully like me. Okay, now we're going to transition into a little bit of a specialty cymbal. We got the flat top ride. And I love this crash cymbal. It's a crash ride cymbal. I can ride on it. It's big enough. It's a 20-inch crash, but I like to call it a crash ride because it does. This is a mellow flat top. It doesn't have any bell. Made by Drill. I love this company. They really have high quality. Made in Turkey. Hand hammered. Really a good cymbal. And it sounds like this. It's just a lot of air, and there's stick definition, but not a lot of tone, wash tone. It has one rivet in it, which really, for one rivet, it pronounces pretty good. It's right down here. It's that. Hear it sizzling. This really has a nice air ambience to it. I like it. It will get way lost in that louder band, but it's really nice for like a piano trio. And this one is made by Drill also. It's the Drill Primitive line. And it's what I call a trashy cymbal. So you can crash it. But still. But on its own crash, it explodes, but then it dies pretty quickly. It's a nice, trashy, mellow kind of dark sound, so it might not be the best for rock and roll so much, but I love it because you can crash a lot on it, and it's still pretty musical, And this beautiful one, which you really want to use maybe in a low volume setting, in the studio, or This is more metallic-y. I don't know. I bought these cymbals used, so I'm not sure of the price of these. I would think this has got to be, everything's like in the mid 300s, I guess, depending on the discount or whatever you're getting. Yeah. No tape. Yeah.
Action.
Hi, we're getting into some crash cymbals now. Here's an American K 19-inch crash that I love. You can ride on it too. It's kind of a crash ride. Medium thin. But I like it. I use this in a lot of show work I do, in shows for some reason. You know, it dies pretty quickly. It has a pretty nice explosion to it. And, you know, I have some tape on the bottom of it because just in the situations I use it in, I want it to die quicker, and the tape mutes the cymbal somewhat. This cymbal is a heartbreaker because I love the cymbal. I love this cymbal so much that I used it for everything I did for about 2 years. And in the second big playing season, I did a lot of rock and roll outside gigs. I really wailed on this cymbal, and it developed a crack. See if you can see it. I don't know. There it is. I mean, it's a pretty big crack, 3 inches or so. So what the crack, when it starts cracking, the cymbal doesn't ring out as much, and gets a little more trashy sounding. It still can be used. You can be able to use it in the studio. You can fix cracks by drilling a hole in each end of the crack and hoping that it'll stop the crack. Some people file out the crack so it doesn't, you know, buzz on itself. But the trashiness of it kind of makes it so it could be kind of a nice little, what is this? This kind of a 19-inch, 19-inch ride cymbal. A little high-pitched sounding, but I like the cymbal because it was just a nice, sweet crash. But it cracked, what can I say? It'd be a nice studio cymbal, I think, because it dies so quickly. See how much longer this lasts for. Here are 2 crash cymbals that are made by an Italian company that I love named UFIP. And they are made in a completely different way than almost any other expensive top-of-the-line cymbal because they're cast cymbals. They're made by casting. They aren't an ingot like a biscuit of metal that then gets hammered out by people, hammered, and then put back in the oven. It's actually molten metal poured into a spinning mold that then gets opened up and then hammered and lathed, whatever they do to it. So usually inexpensive cymbals are cast cymbals, but these are not. This is a totally different thing. It makes it so the shoulder of the bell and to the bow of the cymbal is exactly the same thickness all the way through from the shoulder. Usually a hammered cymbal, this shoulder will be a little bit thinner, and so the bells sound differently on these cymbals. They're just a little more resonant. This is a Bionic series cymbal, so this is a real good rock, a 16-inch rock crash. It's more like a pasty kind of sound because it's more metallic sounding. It really cuts. It has a nice note to it, I think. This is the top of the line at this point in time UFIP cymbal. I like bigger crashes. This is a 20-inch crash, so you could call it a crash ride. But I really like this cymbal. I like it because it's low pitched and, you know, it kind of cuts, you know. But I'm doing a lot more smaller venue work, so I like the bigger cymbals, which might be counterintuitive, but a bigger cymbal can be lower and more mellower sounding. And you can definitely ride on this cymbal. It sounds beautiful. I mean, it's big. You know, this is a 16. Oh no, I'm sorry, 18. What am I saying? 18-inch. Roll that back. 18-inch crash. I thought that was. I used to just only use 18-inch crashes, but then I started getting into the bigger ones. Both by UFIP. Beautiful, beautiful specimens of cymbal making.
Action.
Okay, here's two more, last two of my kind of normal crashes. This one's just a nice normal A Zildjian crash. I hardly ever use it because I'm really picky. I'm getting finicky. I'm using the Turkish cymbals. There's really nothing wrong with this. It's a little on the thick side. I like a little more air maybe. But it has a characteristic A Zildjian sound. I mean, it's just, you know. And here's a 16-inch crash, which is 2 inches smaller in diameter, made by Murat Duril, and it's kind of nice. You know, sometimes it's nice to have a thinner, you know, explosive cymbal, you know, for punctuation. And you know, maybe you think I have a lot of cymbals, but there are times when I have to have 3 drum sets set up at the same time in different locations. I'm doing a show that lasts for 2 weeks. I have a drum set there that in an installation. And then I'll have to do a double gig, you know, on another day during the same time frame. And I'll take my other big rock kit with me. And in the morning, I'll come and set up a small kit at a venue so I can just play it and run to my next gig. So I have to have at least 3 drum kits. Also, I have a 4th kit that I kind of lend out to a nearby club that I live by. So that just lives at a club maybe for a couple of years, and that gets me points with the owner. And I can put some, you know, crummier cymbals like this. You know, if the cymbal gets stolen or broken, it's not the worst thing in the world because it's not really anything real special. The best thing about this is it's older, so it got a little more mellower. Yeah. But that's an easy. This is a Turkish Murat Duril, which is related to the Duril cymbals. And yeah, so that's those two.
Action.
Okay, now we're getting to a little bit more of the specialty cymbal market. And these are 2 18-inch China cymbals. They're played upside down. Like there's the bell. You usually don't put it like this. This is a Zildjian China Boy low. You turn them upside down, and you play them on the shoulder rim of the thing. This Zildjian China has 2 rivets in it, and they're just kind of a specialty cymbal. I don't use them on every gig, but it's nice to have them. It's nice to have one as a specialty cymbal. They have a quick explosion. They're a little trashy sounding, and you can ride on them too, especially in intense parts. A drummer named Billy Cobham, really in the 70s, his use of China cymbals really got me into buying my own Chinas, and he would use them a lot in the music as part of the grooving beats that he did with the Mahavishnu Orchestra amongst a lot of other stuff. They're a nice kind of jazz fusion sound cymbal, but you got to watch out. You don't use them too much because they can get a little annoying because they sound like this. Or like this. See, so they're like. So it's going to sound a little Oriental or Asian. You could use them sparingly, you know. Yeah, so those are two specialty cymbals, but they're pretty common at the same time. Yeah. Tape. Okay, just to show you another little specialty cymbal that's very common these days are these Swiss cheese-like cymbals. I only have one of these right now. This is an 18-inch Istanbul Exist crash. The Exist line was a more moderately priced line. They have a special automated machining process that machines them and hammers them really close to a hand-hammered cymbal. And then I think they just do a little bit of lathing work on these cymbals, so they're very affordable, but they're very good quality. And here's that old the old Chinese cymbal. But the thing about these are great because they really have a trash sound, which I love, and they decay very quickly. So yeah, I'd like to get a bigger one of these so it has a darker sound, but here it has that like trashy kind of wah kind of sound. And compared to that. But you know, you can use this in very low acoustic settings, acoustic guitar playing. You can put it up with a conga set and have it, have it as a cymbal with playing congas. You can hit it with your hand, and also you can hit it pretty hard, and it really doesn't get that loud. So I just wanted to show you these. These kind of cymbals are pretty cool. They every company makes their version of these cymbals.
How much?
Yeah. This cymbal was, I think I got this for like $125. 18-inch. Sometimes you call them ozone cymbals. They're, yeah. Of course, I buy everything used, so. But you can get these pretty decent price. Yep. All right. Hey people, how you doing? So I got 2 crashes from the Bass Monk Studios. Yeah, Bass Monk, and these are cymbals that are put away in the side of a closet, hardly ever used. We've gotten to the point where we're getting a little picky, and it's not like these cymbals are the worst thing in the world, but they're just, and maybe back in the 70s, or if you're playing heavy metal rock, or let's just say hitting them really hard, that you wouldn't really notice the difference. But these 2 crashes, they're both 16-inch crashes, I believe, and they just have they just get a little irritating, It's not so bad, it's just kind of a little too thick sounding. It could have its usages. Here's another one. I could use this in a specialty situation. I like the fact that it's thin. It has a couple little teeny cracks in it, and it dies quicker. And so it's a pretty thin. It's a very thin crash. It's really not a bad sound, really, when you come to think of it. But you know, if you have a cymbal that you don't really like, you could send it away. There's people that specialize in altering cymbals. They'll shave them down, they'll sand them down, they'll put holes in them, you know, like the Swiss cheese kind of holes. They'll make them into specialty cymbals. You can, well, you might not want to do these. They'll cut an inch or a half an inch off of them. You can really, these are cymbals you can kind of like mess with, do things to them, cut a chunk out, you know. Or you could put clockwork in it and make it into a clock, a nice clock for your wall. Yeah, you know, give it to a bar owner and have everybody sign it. Look, somebody put a piece of tape on there. Sabian. There's nothing wrong with Sabian. Sabians are just as good as Zildjian, Pasty. Sabian, they're really part of the big three cymbal companies. I like to call it Sabian, Zildjian, and Pasty. I just fell in love with the Turkish cymbal makers, and there's more each day. There's a market. Turkish cymbals are growing. There's a bunch of different cymbals, and they start off cheap too because they want to break into the market. Duril and Murat Duril are a couple of my favorites. There's a bunch of them out there. The Zildjian Constantinople is a Turkish cymbal, but it's really expensive, and I love them. They're sweet, they're nice. But these are good cymbals you want to keep on an open mic night where you let everybody smash your drums, and there's nothing there. You don't have to worry about it. They're just going to hit that thing, and you're not going to care. It could fall over, get wet, whatever, get a little rusty. Might do some good. Do some good for that cymbal. Yeah, you can get these. You can buy cymbals like this for like $30 a piece, maybe less. I wouldn't pay any more for these. And they're not so bad, really. They're not so bad at all, really. I've heard a lot worse. Yeah, like that. Like that.